Good afternoon, everybody. It is a delight to see you today. We are going to be with Diane Pente,
Pienta.
Piente, and on the Positive Psychology Hour, a series that we do in partnership with the Whole Being Institute. And we're going to have a conversation about magic. Be the Magic, a conversation to open up our heart, fuel our purpose, and connect to joy. And Be the Magic happens to be the book, the title of the book that Diane wrote. And she is going to be, talking about that. But in general, why we're doing this is too often in daily life, our stubborn, conditioned mindsets resist gentle but insistent signals that can pull, push, or even cajole us towards our heart's longing and true expressions of joy. The magic of synchronicity and serendipity is dismissed as little more than accident or annoyance. Learn how an invitation to play and engage in nourishing small daily acts of grace can allow magic to bloom, not only in our lives, and in the lives of others and the world, but inside of us. Through playfulness, we're going to discover how to be open to our own magnificent wisdom, light, and magic. Diane, I welcome you to the call. Thank you so much for joining us today and, talking with us. This is amazing.
Thank you so much for having me, Caroline. I love the Positive Psychology Hour, and whenever I attend, I always leave uplifted and a little bit more joyful. And so that's my intention for today too, that everybody lives a little more joyful and a little more uplifted in coming in.
Awesome. So how did you want to get started? Do you have something to show us, or would you like me to just ask you some questions? Or
I wondered if it's okay with everybody, if we just do maybe a really short meditation. And,
Absolutely.
I feel like at noon, everybody's kind of busy in the morning and we all come together. And so before I do that, I'm just going to hide my self view, so I'm not looking at myself so much. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So maybe if we just take a couple of minutes, and if you're comfortable closing your eyes, go ahead and close your eyes. Just kind of arrive from whatever you had going on this morning. Just kind of pull your energy and you back into you with a couple of deep breaths, deep in your belly. Really land it. And if you're comfortable putting your hand on your heart, go ahead and do that. Just make that connection, that beautiful heart connection. Maybe bring to mind someone in your life who could use some love today. And that could very well be you. So whoever comes to mind first, just bring that person into your heart. See them. And really send them some beautiful love in whatever way that's meaningful to you. Just take just a few seconds here while we do that. Really connecting your heart. And maybe just a few more breaths, another big belly breath. As we invite love into play with us today, be present in our circle. And when you're ready, just go ahead and open your eyes. And come back to the room. Yeah, great. So, Caroline, I know we didn't talk too much about how this would go, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to go that way. I thought I might talk just a little bit about how I came to write the book and the connection with positive psychology. And then I thought we could kind of play with some of the stories, and with reading a few of them and then doing some of the practices, if that sounds good to you.
I love that idea. Let's do it.
Okay. All right, great. Well, so So I wrote Be the Magic last year, and a lot of people have asked me how I came to write it. And it started like 25 years ago, I think, when I had a cancer diagnosis in my early 30s. And it was a real wake-up call to really, I was working at a business that I had started, and it was successful, but it wasn't really my heart's joy. And it was at the time that I got very interested in what makes people thrive. What are different healing modalities? And one of the things I got very interested in is, as somebody had said to me, "Oh, I had cervical cancer," and they said, "Are you angry?" And I thought, well, what's the connection? And I was kind of angry. I was feeling trapped in my business. And I got really curious about what's the power of our thoughts to affect our health, affect our vibrancy. And so it was like a light switch had gone off. And I immediately said, I don't want to I don't want to have cancer. I don't want to have be in a position that I don't want to be in. And I managed to step out of that business and pursue, and it became really important for me to pursue joy. So for the next 10 years, I was pursuing things that I was really interested in, healing modalities, art, spirituality, but I was doing that kind of by night and doing business by day. And then it wasn't until my parents were in that death, dying, and dementia stage. Maybe some of you have experienced some, that stage with your parents. And I was in Boston, they were in Pennsylvania. It was at a time, and this is when I actually came into positive psychology. And it was at one of those points in my life where I felt like I could not put one more thing on my plate. I don't know if you've been in that position where you're like, I can't do one more thing. I was driving between Pennsylvania and Boston every couple of weeks. We were moving. I was working. I was tending to parents who were saying, we don't need any help, even though they were really declining in a big way. And I saw this an advertisement for positive psychology. And it was when it was just starting out with Tal Ben-Shahar and Maria Serwa and Megan McDonough. And so it felt like divine intervention. And it was during the course of that year-long program that my father died. My mother really spiraled into hardcore dementia. My husband had a cancer diagnosis. We moved from a house that we had lived in and loved for many years, and we were renovating another house in Pennsylvania. And I love it because it's so easy to embrace positive psychology and the magic when everything's going our way and we feel really on top of the world. But it's when I think it's when we're in that fire of initiation that where we can continue to see the good, even when life is kind of piling all these things on top of this. So it feels like that's where the power was. And at the end of the course, my adrenals were burnt out, and I really gave myself permission to explore even just full-time different modalities. I wanted to know what really makes people thrive. What do the really happy people know? And it became very clear that the happiest people really, that the world is constantly sending us these guidance and these signposts, but we just dismiss it. And we have these blinders that keep us from seeing it, from seeing the magic that's constantly being sent to us. And some of the biggest blinders are rumination and worry, as we know from positive psychology. And when I think about myself, I think about the amount of time that I spent either worrying or thinking about past things. I think, oh my gosh, that energy, which is housed in our bodies and our minds and our whole energy field. I thought, gosh, I could have spent that time and energy learning 2 new languages. There's so much creativity that can happen for that. So along the way, I studied with extraordinary teachers, and you ever hear exactly what you need to hear, exactly when you need to hear it, and the perfect words. And I kept a journal of that, and it was very helpful for me. And I started getting the intuitions that if it's and hearing, if it's helpful for you, Diane, it will be helpful for other people. And so I've woven these quotes, these sayings, these words of wisdom into a little bit of weaving into personal stories, but then also practices, because I don't know about you, but sometimes I read really great books and I think, oh, that's a really good idea. But unless we practice it, unless we actually put it into practice, kind of goes into our brains by osmosis, but doesn't really kind of shift our behavior and shift our patterns. So that gives a little bit about the book. Yeah. So Caroline, did you have any questions on that, or
Yeah,
yeah.
I just wanted to say that it's not that I have a question, but I do want to comment that one of the things that I love about the book is just how beautiful it is. You must have beauty and excellence in it, and
I do.
yeah, as one of your character strengths. And I mean, it's lovely to touch. It's lovely to turn the pages. I love that the inside cover, it sort of reminds me of a, a beautiful wallpaper or something that you would have. And I love, what's behind you, a painting there, and that everything has a little quote. She decided to stop looking for the light and instead become it, right at the top of the page. And um, I love that particular quote. And I was wondering if you would talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. Um, you know, I think a lot of times as seekers, we kind of look outside ourselves for the light. Like, what is, for me, I was thinking, well, what's my purpose? What am I here to do? What is mine? Given what is mine to do? And kind of like reaching for that light, right? Like I think we do that in positive psychology. We try to like lift ourselves up. And when I saw this quote, she decided to stop looking for the light and instead become it. It really just shifted into this act of service, how every single one of us have this incredible light in us. I mean, really, we're here as spirits in this human form, and our light is just beautiful. We're here to shine it out. And so instead of looking for, oh, what is out there that I can grasp onto, how can I shine my light out in the world? How can each of us shine our light out in the world in a way that brings us joy, in a way that we came here to do in the first place? And then life becomes fun. I think when you go from that seeking outward to saying, yeah, if I'm the light, who am I if I'm the light? What is my light? And what do I have to shine forward? So I know when I thought it actually shifted my whole perspective, really.
Yeah, and we had a question in the chat to explain a little bit more about what. Can you please elaborate on what happy people know? Is that what you
Yeah.
meant, Elaine? You can unmute if you
Yes.
want. What happy people know?
Yeah, I think there's so many different things, right? And it's like even in positive psychology, and there's so many different elements of it, whether it's great relationships, a lot of people who are, forgiveness is a big part of that. Like if we have relationships that are a little wonky, it's hard to have a peaceful heart, right? People who are leading meaningful, purposeful lives, who have really tapped into what their light is and is shining that out. That's something. I think creativity is a huge piece of this. It's people who have found their joy and are living it. And that sounds so easy to do, right? Like, yes, find your joy and do it. But for a lot of people, that is actually very elusive. There was a great master healer who healed a lot of people. And he said what he saw was 95% of everyone that he treated didn't actually know what they wanted. They didn't know like what their purpose was. They didn't know what they wanted. And that was contributing to the disease and the distress that he was seeing. And so I think if we can tune into what brings us joy, what do we want? And I don't mean that in a materialistic sense, but like what does our soul want, and tap into that, and then go ahead and take steps forward towards that and to live that. So that's a little bit of it. The book is a collection of 74 little vignettes, and we could come at it at lots of different angles. People who are the happiest are very engaged. Participation is such a life, is a function of life. And so people who are the happiest are engage with things that give meaning to their life. So those are just a couple of things. Does
Yeah,
that answer the question a little bit?
I think so. And I also would love to add that what we're talking about especially the science of resilience is that it's not that there aren't challenges, and it's not that there aren't things like, as Diane mentioned, a cancer diagnosis. And it's not like there aren't things that happen to us that we wouldn't necessarily wish on anyone, because life is unpredictable. And I would say, even to a certain extent, we can't control it. We live in a world in which there's an awful lot that we can't control. So, what we know about resilience and what we know about people that are happier are that they're able to evaluate that or see that clearly, and right, it's not that they push that away, they fully acknowledge that, and I'm using that word again, a big and, they also notice the wind that touches their skin, kissing them in the morning light. They also notice a piece of music that stirs their soul. They also notice their grandchild, little feet that wiggle when they suckle at their mother's breast. It's what we pay attention to. So it's the and. And Diane, I think what this book is particularly good at for me is helping us focus our attention on these little micro practices so that we can discover. We're in the explore, discover, and create process that, for me, sort of diminishes the rumination, the worry, right? The more I focus my mind on these, noticing and paying attention to these other things, um, we can talk about the sensations, the senses and sensations. Gretchen Rubin was at the JCC last Thursday night, and she was talking about her new book, The Five Senses. And your book fits right in there because it helps us access with these micro practices that are unique, they're individual, they're things that you've discovered. I would call it your inner artist, your inner scribe, your inner, seeker, all of them that you've written down and collected in your journals, and then turned them into this beautiful book that help us turn the volume up on creativity and magic, and turn the volume down on rumination, worry. um, I would even call them the saboteurs in our mind, the things that make us feel like nothing's going to change, it's all going to be horrible.
Great. Well, and that's so beautiful, Caroline. It actually is a great segue into one of the stories. If with your permission, I'd love to read it, and then
Take
maybe
it
we could
away.
we could talk about that. Let me just see what.
How often do we get read to, everyone? I think this is beautiful. We had Sue Baldwin come on, and she read us a children's story in
Oh,
one positive psychology hour. So breathe it in, everyone. Just let yourselves be read to.
so the title of this is Life Said, I'm going to make you happy, but first I'm going to make you strong. I met Lori at the John C. Campbell Folk School one summer. The John C. Campbell Folk School is on a magical piece of land deep in the Great Smoky Mountains and offers week-long immersions in almost every art and craft imaginable in a community life that transforms people. Lori was in the midst of a protracted, acrimonious divorce and had a 6-month wait before her court date. She packed up a van, didn't tell anyone where she was going, including her grown children, drove to the folk school, and headed straight for the blacksmithing studio. In the hot city forge all week, most nights, and more than a few weekends, Lori hammered steel into gorgeous works of art. She'd done some smithing before, but nothing like this. The idea of sitting around for 6 months worrying and waiting for her court date made 40+ hours a week in the forge look like a vacation. Lori's focus was on creativity and making beautiful handmade things. I met her about 4 months into her 6-month escapade, and we'd laugh and talk in the dining hall. She showed us the gorgeous metal art she created, then told us about the big project she was working on, a full suit Wonder Woman outfit meticulously hammered out of metal. Fascinated, I asked what she was going to do with it. Wear it to court, she said, as we all burst out laughing. Without missing a beat, Lori declared, life said, I'm going to make you happy, but first, I'm going to make you strong. Lori seems to have figured out the magic formula for happiness. 1, do something you love every day. 2, use your creative gifts to make beauty. 3, use your hands. 4, surround yourself with like-minded community. 5, be in community, laugh in community. 6, step away literally or metaphorically enough to get a different perspective on your worry, enough that you can even get a sense of humor going about it. 7, do some physical work every day. Be active, move your body, ideally in different ways, build different muscles in your body and in your brain. 8, chase joy and magic and fun. When life inevitably deals one of her testing blows, few of us can immerse ourselves in the art studio for 6 months. But this refocus on creativity and beauty when the chips are down is a powerful antidote to fear and worry. I don't know about you, but I find it hard to turn away from the problem when I'm stuck in the middle of it. My brain spins trying to figure out ways to resolve it as I simultaneously try not to think about it in the middle of the night. But it's darn near impossible to worry about something when you're tending a coal forge, hammering red hot steel, or sewing, or working with clay, or what is it that you love to do? I've experienced, and maybe you have too, that what doesn't kill us really does make us stronger. But we make ourselves the strongest when we can turn away from the problem, if just for a smidge, and focus our energy on doing what we love. What makes you strong?
Beautiful. I wonder if
So
anybody has any thoughts in the chat.
yeah,
You know,
it'd be great if people can put in the chat what makes you strong? What if you're in the midst of a challenging situation can take your mind away from it?
over the weekend, we had Spa Day for women with cancer, and we had Maria Serwa join us. And she was talking about this, why it's important to feel strong. And one of the things that she said was that if we're constantly experiencing ourselves as helpless, it's hard to feel hopeful. And that if we do something, and in this case, make something, right, then we experience ourselves as that part of ourselves, and that gives an upward lift. Would you say that that's been true for you, Diane?
I think that's very true. I think what some of the things I love to do are I play fiddle, and it's so easy to say I don't have time. This is the last thing I have time to do. But sometimes I will play literally for 4 minutes in the morning. I'll just get it out and play. And the shift can be, if I'm even having a really busy day, the shift can be amazing. I think a lot of times we think that we have to have a big chunk of time. And, the story says, Lori went for 6 months but it's really, if you like to sew, maybe there's just a few stitches before you go to work, or if you're on the subway or something. But when we do what we love, we're filled with love. So that automatically, that energy comes into us. And then we can start thinking more creatively. We can get some perspective on what's going on. I've found that so often in my life as my husband is dealing with some cancer issues and things, sometimes I'll just step away, and I like to make these little pine needle baskets. And sometimes there's just time for literally like 4 or 5 minutes, but sometimes that's all we need to shift. I think there's a great positive psychology study. There's a scientist who said, I forget who it is, but they said just even doing something like maybe that you don't love, but just kind of getting out of the rut of the worry, and, wash one dish. And
Yes, Dan Tomasulo.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, wash one dish, and that can just help shift ourselves. Yeah, and if people want to put in the chat, like what is something you love to do? What is something that you that can really bring you into yourself and into that state of flow?
I know that as a physical person, right?
Mhm.
That and my body is with me all of the time. So even, touching like can bring me into a different state of my mind, just doing a body scan as we did at the very beginning. Um, Walking down the street in a fun way. Sometimes I will even do, in NEA, we have something called X-ray anatomy, and I invite everyone to do this. It's not done in a way of judging or mocking anybody. It's just a fascinating study of anatomy. I will look at somebody in front of me and I will assume their walk. And suddenly, because we know from brain science that the position that the body in floods the body with neurochemicals. So for example, if you're like this, it is really impossible to feel happy. Right? So the body position impacts our neurochemistry. So I will walk, and I love walking like teenagers too. Oftentimes they're on their phones, and I'll just like put my body in that position. Or sometimes somebody will be very elegant, and I'll walk like that. And it's just a fun little game that I play, but it teaches me about uh, torque, line alignment. I
Mm.
go, gosh, wow, I can feel that in my body. I can feel that in my back. I can feel that on my shoulder. Let's see. Misha News
Okay.
says, I love taking on someone else's walk. Such a great idea. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Helene, chatting with dogs. How hilarious. That is great. Suzanne says, pick flowers
Mm.
can help me. Like Caroline, I am often focused on physical activity to be balanced, but I learned how cultivating emotional balance through yoga nidra can help me mentally and physically. Yes. And
Yeah,
Diane, you can talk about that too. Um, the breath, right?
yeah.
And
Breath is,
Rachel says ditto, but she does it with cats.
yeah.
She talks with cats.
Yeah, it's such a, it's just getting us, just like moving our body in a different way. It's like Amy Cuddy did the whole power poses. And like, if you're like this, I'm suddenly so much more confident and just playing. What I love about this is the playfulness of what you're all saying, because what I'm my intention for this book was that it be playful but potent. And so a lot of times when we do kind of work on ourselves, it can be serious. And sometimes we're dealing with some serious stuff. But play is the highest form of learning. I mean, it's how kids learn, and we often forget that. So when we could be playful about how we're trying to shift and interrupt our patterns, that's it's fun. It becomes a fun game as opposed to, that I think the quote is, the subtle impression of constantly working on ourselves to improve ourselves.
Can we go back and can I ask you a question about caregiving and
Yeah.
even go back to your mom and
Mhm.
how when you were growing up, you you actually learned a lot of this by attempting to keep her up, right? She suffered from depression. And I
Yeah.
know that a lot of people on the call are in that position where they've either had to take care of somebody or they have a friend who's down and they've attempted to lift them up. And you were able to find the gift in that, to find the gold. I just wonder if you would talk about that a little bit. I think
Yeah.
it's very inspiring in the book.
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, and my mother was a, Depression era, World War II child. And so that generation, she had suffered some trauma when she was young that was never addressed. And I don't know if that was the cause or not, but she suffered from depression, some mental illness, and she had a real negative bent. She probably had a very low happiness set point, it seems. And as a kid, kids are so smart. I think I was very tuned in to the energy, and I could just literally watch when she would start to be in kind of a neutral place and start to go down. And I knew what would often shift her, not always, but she loved big band music. So I would get on the radio and I'd put the big band music on and I tried to get her to dance. And if she could dance, then, sometimes she would start to laugh instead of going down. Um, she loved her grandparents' farm. And I would say, oh, tell me about the farm. and I would hear the same stories, you know. So it was just shifting, but I think also she also loved to dance. And so getting her to move her bodies in different ways and her mind, you know, we had beautiful flower gardens. I'd say, oh, can we go look at the flowers? So what I'd find, you know, as a kid, you don't really like, you know, it's not something that you see as a gift. It was kind of exhausting. But I really get that. I honed my intuition. And I also, she gave me a love of peace. You know, it's like when the storm clouds started brewing, there's just not peace in the house. Nobody was happy. But so I have this love for peace and also for an appreciation for the power of our thoughts and just how they not only affect us, but every, you know, the energy around us, the energy of a house, the energy of a family. And you know, after I had left, she started going down into dementia, probably around 70. And by the time she was like, you know, in her, she was not interruptible, is what I would say. And so just watching that, I really got how we sandblast these grooves. And the more they're sandblasted, either positively or negatively, once we're just careful about what we choose. And I think that's the key, is that sometimes it's hard. My life is not rainbows and unicorns. And even though I want us all to be the magic, it's not always easy. So recognizing that, but also recognizing in every moment, we do have a choice of what we focus on. Do we focus on what we want or what we don't want? And so,
Beautiful,
yeah,
beautiful, and powerful. Thank you for sharing that and going there. I think that's very brave and inspiring. I know a lot of us have either parents that we're taking care of or even children on the spectrum that we're taking care of, and it can be relentless
yeah,
caregiving.
yeah, it
Um,
is. Yeah, it is relentless. And it's also, I think we're so much luckier now that we have resources. I think about my mother, who there's just a time and place where you didn't get help. It was considered shameful. So you kind of hid it and people would be in isolation. And so to not only have that going on, but then to have the shame on top of it is, compounds it.
let's talk about the happiness set point. It seems like yours might be quite high, and just so people know on the call, they might, Sonia Lubomirsky's work and others, but that there's a happiness set point, and then we kind of return to it even after, let's say we've had, and did you find that to be true, a diagnosis that, or even something that's wonderful that happens, right? Or
Mhm.
something that is devastating, we kind of return to this set point. Have you found that you have a kind of a high happiness set point and uh, or
I
not?
actually don't, Caroline. I mean, that's what's kind of funny, right? A lot of people think that I do, but I think that one of the reasons I'm so interested in this is that, as they say, the wound is where the light gets in. And so um, I've dealt with some depression myself. I've dealt with some unhappiness. Um, and so I think I don't actually know what my actual happiness set point is, but I do know that I'm always interested in reaching for the light. And so I'm able to generate even when I'm kind of in a low place. And it's from practice. It's from a lot of these practices in the book of saying, wait a minute, I don't have to stay in this place. I can shift this. And what is the practice that shifts it now? It's kind of like the spire model. There is no one formula of, oh, I'm not feeling, particularly bright today. What it could be, like you said, it could be something that we need to move our body. It could be that for me, sometimes if I'm not creative, if I'm too intellectual for a while, my soul is not happy and I just need to start doing something creative. So it's being attuned to what not only your body, but I think your soul is asking you to do too.
Yeah, Maria Sawad yesterday or on the spa day said that one of the gifts of her younger brother dying of pancreatic cancer was he was a yes person, right? And she was, similar to what you were saying, not necessarily that, She said, girl, you better start saying yes to some things, right? And let's go back though. We in positive psychology, we talk about the character strengths. I'm curious as to what yours are, your top five. And then we talk about that. And that, of course, everyone, if you want to, I'll put it in the chat. You can take the VIA character strengths. That's at the VIA Institute. And there are about 24 character strengths that we all have, but our combination, our constellation of them is very unique and different. And when we play into our strengths, Diane said that one of her strengths was beauty and excellence, and her book is just gorgeous, right? It's just beautifully crafted. And so she's playing into her strengths there. That's one way to do it. The other is this, looking at this micro practices, and I wonder next if we can actually try, as you wanted to, some of the micro practices in the book. These micro practices, these little things that are individual. Each person has to kind of pick and choose what works for them. When Diane was talking about be the light, right, and how she wanted to be the light, some of that is what works for me, right? That might work for my sister or my friend, or, that writing gratitudes, or that journaling, or that jogging, or that gardening, but, reading, going to movies. But what if that doesn't work for me? I need to find what works for me. Um, and Joanne put in the chat, thank you. You can take the Via Character Strength survey here, and it's completely free. And that's a good thing. It's like writing your name, right? We can all write our name with our dominant hand very easily. But if you take your other hand, for me with my left hand, and write that, you can do it, but it's harder. So utilizing your character strengths and really saying, okay, how can I utilize these in my life, is like, it's easy. It's just automatic, right?
Yeah.
So Diane, what are some of your character strengths?
Oh, well, so my top five, we've got beauty and excellence is one of them. Spirituality always comes up very high for me. I had a teacher who said life viewed from a human perspective can often seem so tragic, and the same situation viewed from a spiritual perspective suddenly gets really interesting. And I found that to be true. It's kind of like looking for the gift in, just the story about my mother, right? You could say, oh my gosh, it was so difficult to grow up, but it's also like, what was the lesson? What was the gift in that? And life is just, I think this is part of what the magic is, when we see that we're in this co-creation with the world, and that we're actually getting all of these signals and this relationship and all of this beauty that's constantly being offered to us. It's easier to rise up out of what's difficult or challenging, or like, oh, one more day. So spirituality is very important. Love of learning. I could take every class that there is on the planet. Gratitude is always been a big one for me too. So that's just being
Wow,
grateful. Yeah, for what we have.
that's a dynamic profile. And it makes so much sense as I read your book that I can see these. Is there a particular practice that you want to share with us that you were thinking might be fun for us to do
Yeah,
from the
let's
book?
well, we could look at the transition time. I could read that and see if that's something that people would like to
Great.
look at. I think it's looking at it and looking and seeing how does that work for you? So this is called transition time. How do you transition between your daily activities? It was the end of a yoga class and I was feeling really good. I'd been practicing for about 15 years and had the confidence that can come with confidence. I felt like my poses were strong, open, and fluid. So when the teacher closed the class with, watch how you're transitioning from one pose to another. The space between the poses is more important than the pose itself. And this is the true yoga. I did not like this. What transition? What space? I couldn't remember one moment of transitioning in the entire 90 minutes of what I had thought until then was a darn good practice. How we do anything is how we do everything. So I started looking for where this else was showing up in my life. It turns out it was everywhere. Usually I was so busy rushing to get to the next pose or life activity that I wasn't even aware of the transition. Did I think the transition was unimportant while the pose or the activity was important? Well, yes, I did. Could this be why I always felt rushed, like there was never enough time? Why my transition from life to yoga class often included me scrambling, driving fast, hell bent on getting to class, where I could then be calm and zen? Life is sometimes too weird. When my to-do list is a mile long, I usually run from one activity or phone call or appointment to another. It's in our culture, this time sickness. Dr. Larry Dossey coined this term time sickness to define the belief that time is slipping away, that there's never enough of it, and we've got to go faster and faster to keep up. So I started creating transition time, 5 or 10 minute spaces between the activities during which I just sit, be quiet, and do nothing except transition. The first time my husband saw me sitting on the sofa in the middle of the day doing nothing. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Don't interrupt me, please. I'm having transition time." He's used to these sort of things by now. At first, 5 minutes of silent transition time was hard. When time feels short, when I'm running behind, when there's more to do than can get done in the day, the idea of sitting in empty space for 5 minutes between activities can seem downright irresponsible, unproductive, lazy, and even more stressful. There are a million ways to transition, but here's the crazy thing. Quantum physicists tell us that time is malleable and fluid. I really don't know how this happens, but when I slow down, time slows down, and suddenly there's more than enough time for everything. Life flows, creative ideas and impulses come out of nowhere in that space too. One day I made myself sit for just 5 minutes. I was nearly crawling out of my skin because there was so much to do, but I told myself the transition time was equally as important as the activities, and being a perfectionist, I wanted to get good at transitions. As my mind slowly calmed down, I lit upon an unread book on dowsing. Something told me to pick it up, and an hour later I was entranced. Clearly what was so important could wait. That moment led to studying for a month in England with a master dowser and seeded a deep love affair with the English countryside. In other words, magic was planted in the transition zone. The empty space, the void, is where creation begins. If you're an artist, you might be accustomed to looking at the world this way. The empty space between plants is what gives form to the landscape design, or between objects in a painting. Horse therapy guides might refer to the space as the liminal zone, where we're not fully immersed in either our wild animal mind or our modern thinking mind, but an in-between place of not knowing what will come that is often the space of the greatest growth and development. I started seeking and finding the liminal space everywhere. My fingers exist because of the empty space between them. Otherwise, they'd be a mitten. How do you transition out of bed, into bed, from work to home, from one appointment to another? Is there empty space? Is it calm, unhurried, observant? Is it frenetic, rushed, unaware? How do you want it to be? Can you play with it? So the invitation is just to kind of take a moment and think about how you transition. How did you transition from whatever you were doing into this class today? And or how will you transition out of this into something else? Maybe even just kind of put in the chat. How does that look for you?
I think this is such a gorgeous idea. I know that, for example, when I finish teaching or I'm Nia, which is my practice,
Mhm.
sometimes I I can't even spell, if that makes sense. I
Uh-huh.
can't articulate the words. I'm in just a different place in my whole experience. And so that transition takes me a moment to just like breathe and I no longer expect myself to do spreadsheets right after class because I'm in just a different part of my brain,
Right,
right?
right,
And
right.
we have something in NIA called dancing through life, which is that every movement I make feels like I'm dancing. So
Mm.
that when you're outside of class, that's what you're doing. And I made this conscious effort. I have to now Zoom from home versus at the JCC, and my desk is in a new place. And I walked down the street and I gave someone I met a hug. And I didn't have much time, but I just said, I'm not going to make myself crazy. I might have made you crazy time because I was
I knew you were
not,
coming.
you know, and I told you I'm coming, but I was
Mm.
really conscious of feeling the light on my face and it just I'm not always that way, but today I was, and I wonder if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's just being conscious, this time sickness. It's a cultural thing, right? So not to beat ourselves up for it. It's just kind of the water that we swim in. But if we can be conscious about, like, how do we slow down? And I love how you're saying, like, you slowed down, you gave somebody a hug and you were right on time. Like, a lot of times we think, oh, we've got to hurry and that will get us there faster. And I really don't know how this works, but I do find that when I slow down, the world slows down a little bit too. And things are just more in flow. And it is that, that space in between, right? Like, that is a forest therapy guy. That's what we call the liminal zone, where you're not really in one space or another, but you're just kind of waiting for, it's where ideas come in, it's where creativity comes in, where grace comes in.
Speaking of
Yeah.
which, I am sure I am not the only person that wants to know what dowsing is. Anybody
Oh,
else?
dowsing is what all of our ancestors knew. That's how you can find, I was dowsing for land energy lines, but dowsing was used to find water. So, until, oh, I don't know, maybe even 100, 150 years ago,
Gotcha.
you would go with your dowsing rods, and the rods would react to different energy in the land. And so you would find those lines and be able to find water. So yeah,
Fun.
I know. I had
Beautiful.
no idea that I would ever be doing that, but
That's great. That must have been fun. And you did that in England?
I did. Yeah, I did do that in England,
Okay.
and so
Like,
yeah, that's
sign
a
me
whole
up. That
nother
sounds
story.
that
Yeah,
sounds that sounds
yeah.
amazing. Joanne says that she loves this idea. She often goes from meeting to meeting on Zoom these days, and her transitions are checking her email and how, she could maybe do this a little differently. And Helene says, I think I have hurry sickness. I need to practice this transition and not feel I need to always be productive in doing. And Rachel says, too many of my transitions are mindless and let's see, hang on one second. Mindless and even compound my stress.
Mm, I
Rachel, I
think
hear you.
that's so true. Yeah, and just we're so connected to our devices. It's so true. It's when we have a moment. I think all of us, or many of us, it's almost an automatic reaction. Oh, let me check and see. So yeah, just being mindful can be a way of transitioning. And I think you can have fun with transitions, right? Like, being quiet is just my way of, like, sitting and being quiet. But it could be just listening. I'm going to listen to a piece of music for 3 minutes, or whatever, kind of gives you joy, or can kind of take you to that in between state. I think that'd be
Valerie
great.
wants to know what's the name of the dowsing book you read.
Oh my gosh. That is a good question. You know what? Send me an email and I'll look it up.
Yeah.
It was by Dennis Wheatley, Wheatley, who was he's passed now, but he was second or third generation dowser in England. It's a very small book. It's very thin. You could read it very quickly. And he just talks about the process of it. He was amazing. He was he was hired to not only find water, but to find lost children, and to find lost animals and lost wedding rings. And he was just kind of
I was going to
legendary.
say jewelry.
Jewelry. Yeah, exactly.
I love that what you're describing in the sitting for a moment is almost sounds like you're going from fight, flight, freeze into a different resonance in your brain and in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. You're just giving your nervous system, that vagus nerve, just to say, it's okay. It's okay. And I'll actually, that's another vignette in the book, to just say to yourself, shh. The sound shh is used in almost every culture as a way of, we do it to soothe a baby, but there's a reason for that. It actually helps the liver. It helps our vagus nerve. It helps us calm down. So sometimes it's even just like saying shh. So simple, but it really has this calming effect. And then we could go into our next, phase with a little more intention, a little more perspective.
And I love that it's not like a judgment. It's just an SH sound, almost like you would say, ah, you
Yeah,
go shh.
yeah, shh,
And the
yeah.
pursing of the lips, we learned Elizabeth Cole is a knee instructor, and she is teaching us about the voice. There's a Thursday
Mm,
workshop on the voice, and she was saying that the tongue is rooted all the way down here, right?
wow.
I know. And so that when we're leaning forward, when we're doing, and we can even brace our head with our tongue, like our tongue when we can pay attention to what we're doing with our tongue. So this idea of, you know, going through transitions and just the vagus nerve, SH, relaxing all of this. Vagus meaning what? Branches.
It's
Uh,
actually, the root is vagrant. So vagrant as in traveling, and it travels to each one of our organs. And the letter sh in Chinese medicine, the sound sh, I should say, is actually related to the liver, which in our culture, so many people, just because of our stress and how we live, it's often stressed out. So even just kind of doing that to calm our liver a little bit too, shh, feels very nice. I keep doing this.
yeah. So we this is a micro practice that we've learned. Did you want to go into a particular one? We've got about 6 minutes left, but
All right. Sure. I'll do a short story, which is become a vociferous blesser. Bless everything in your path and watch magic happen. This morning I got up and was just in kind of a mood. I'd hoped to get up early and write, but slept in and felt like I was trying to catch up to myself at 7 o'clock in the morning. This did not bode well for the day ahead. I reminded myself, I can change this. There are so many practices that can help shift our negative mindsets. Gratitude is one of them. Friends, do you find it hard to be grateful when you're already in the middle of a downward spiral? I do, even after practicing these kinds of things a long time. My list of I'm grateful for this clean water, for my friends and family, felt a little forced and empty. But then I started speaking to everything I touched and saw them as though they were old friends, which of course they are. You could say I started blessing everything. Hello, beautiful blue bathroom sink, you old friend. Thank you for so much for helping me to keep my teeth and face and hands so clean and delivering the perfect temperature at the flick of a faucet. You're amazing. Hello, my hands with your beautiful opposable thumbs, all you fingers in perfect working order, allowing me to brush my hair, write with a feather pen, and make celery juice for breakfast. Oh my gosh, it's endless what you do. Hello, toilet. You know, you probably have no idea how happy I am that you take away all the smelly crap and waste out of my house with one little push of a lever. Suddenly, I was connected in relationship to everything. I started feeling kind of giddy. David Abram writes about the concept of the world watching us, that we are not the only ones observing or not observing, depending upon our mindfulness, the world around us. This invites us to playfully picture that the world and everything in it observes us. Do I want to be observed as an ornery, frustrated, middle-aged woman, or as someone who is vibrantly alive, joyful, and in love with life? How do you want to be seen? Gratitude lists can sometimes feel like a list. We shift our mindsets into positivity much more quickly when we can feel the thankfulness or feel the connection. Have some fun and try it. Speak to and thank those faithful friends who serve you each day. Your kitchen table you've spent hours at, your loyal computer, your phone that is like a body part appendage, whatever's true for you. See if they don't possess an aliveness that makes you delighted to be in their company, and watch what magic happens. Let your life be the prayer. And so the practice I often, in addition to doing this, other practice I would invite is to kind of just make a list and say, if you were to look around your room, wherever you are now, how would for me, it's the drapes and the paintings and the sofa, how would they be observing me? And maybe jot that down. And then maybe afterwards, I know we're a little short on time here, but maybe afterwards, and say, how do I want them to see me? How do I want them to look at me when I come into this room? And it's a little goofy, but it's very powerful, and and it could be fun. So, yeah.
awesome. It reminds me of how when we change our relationship to something, it changes us, right?
Yes. Observed.
Yeah. And this
Exactly.
idea of there's two words. I love the and word that we use in positive psychology. Yes, this is true. And this is also true. And what I hear you saying is, I am with, right?
Yeah.
Joy with this toothbrush, joy with this bed sheet joy. I'm in relationship with. That operative word is like, I'm listening to the music and I am with the saxophone, right?
Yeah.
I am in relationship with the saxophone. I'm in relationship with the and you were saying blessing it,
Yeah,
right?
I love that. I love that width. That's really what it is. It's not, we're so used, even in nature, we're like, oh, it's us and nature and the trees. But no, we are nature. We're all part of it. So we're in this relationship, we're connected. And I think a lot of people today feel the sense of disconnection and a sense of not belonging. It really is kind of pervasive right now. And this is actually a way that can help us be in connection really with everything in our life. And so,
Instantaneously, right?
yeah, instantly, it's the shift is truly can truly be, 30 seconds.
They
So
used to say, if you're feeling down, go outside and take what was it, a constitutional, a walk, right? It
yes,
was called
yes,
a walk. And I know that sometimes with the Zoom lifestyle now and computers, there has been days when I was like, gosh, I haven't been outside today.
yeah,
And which I
yeah,
find very surprising. And then so am I with just being outside of my domicile, outside of my home, and can I, and when I do, when I walk outside and the air hits me and my feet, I hear my feet striking the pavement, it's a whole different relationship with the world.
yes, yes. And yeah, just being outside is just huge. And I would say um, I'm not doing it today because I'm presenting, but pretty much anytime I'm on a Zoom, if I can, I'm taking my iPad outside. I go up with I would walk with my phone, whatever. Just sometimes we could multitask in that way that we could actually do both. And I know it's not always possible, but you can get creative about that too. It doesn't have to be either or. I
Yeah,
just
I
encourage
have
people.
paintings. I have this amazing painting of the sky
Ah,
there. Well,
uh,
thank you so much, everyone. How can we get Be the Magic if we're interested in that?
oh, great. You can reach me at dianepienta.com, or it's on Amazon and all of the big stores, or you can go. I always love to support the smaller independent bookstores. You can go and ask them to order it for you too. So thank you so much.
Amazing.
And I'd love to, can I just finish with one quote?
Sure.
And that is that the deepest part of this is Robert Brown. The deepest part of us is happiest savoring and not going as fast as we can, not getting on to the next accomplishment, noticing things, noticing the beauties. And so the invitation after this is just to savor like a little bit more this afternoon. See if there's something you could savor just a little bit more. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, and thank you for the copy of the book. I highly recommend it, everybody. I was having a challenge putting it down last night um, because it just was so delightful. It was fun to read. And it's a great thing, I think, to do when you're looking at those transition times to add a little micro practice in there, whether it's between yoga or Nia, or just between lunch and your next activity or from one meeting to another. Thank you, Diane, for sharing your heart with us and
Thank
your
you so much for
magic.
having me. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Next week, Dr. Sherry Kelly is in the house and she is going to be talking about anxiety and how to harness it. And there's things that you can do, that we can do, that actually can put our anxiety to work for us. So I hope you'll join us for that. Take care. Have a happy Memorial Day weekend, everybody. I'll see you next time.